Call the Budget Committee meeting of Thursday, November 18th, 2010 to order. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Chairman McMillan,
Here.
Vice Chairman Mackey,
Present.
Mr. Andrupont.
Here.
Mrs. Griffin was unable to attend the Budget Committee meeting, but will be here for the Insurance Committee meeting at 5. Mr. Hassan.
Here.
Mrs. Trimming. Here. And President Guidry.
Thank
You
you.
do
If
have
anyone in the audience would like to speak on our budget presentation tonight, please fill out a blue slip and get it to Jessica, and we'll make sure you have your opportunity. Also, if you have a cell phone or pager, please turn that off at this time or put it to silent. With that being said, administrative presentation of the budget fiscal year 2011. Mr. Bean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleased to present to the committee tonight the 2011 proposed budget for the police jury. And before we get into that, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize a few folks who helped put this together. As you know, it's really a big undertaking. It's several months in the making, all the departments involved, review of all of our expenditures and revenues, and so many people are needed to put this document together, namely the Finance Division under Jerry Milner, of course. Judy Hewlett was very instrumental in helping with the financial information as well as a lot of the presentation information. Kelly Fontenot and all the finance staff. From our administrative office, Jessica always does a great job putting this presentation together and other parts. Dane Boland was very helpful as well this year. I want to save my last thank you, though, for the person most responsible for what you'll see tonight and what you've been given, and that's Ms. Tammy Buffkin, our Assistant Finance Director.
Amen. I
wasn't going to leave her out, Sandy. Save the best for last. I've known Tammy since I've been here, of course, 15-plus years, but sitting where I do now, I have an even much greater appreciation for what she does for the police jury. It is nothing short of miraculous what she can do in putting this important information together for you. Working with all the departments is a big task. Some are quicker than others at getting information in. Her interpersonal skills are great, and probably most of all, it's her patience that is needed, and she has it in loads, and it makes all this come together somehow, all toward the end. And I want to say a special thanks, Tammy. You've made this very helpful, and it's an amazing amount of work, so thank you very much for all your preparation. With that, I'll go through this. We have a short outline here. First thing I want to do is cover some budget format changes. We've taken a look at how we've done the budget, and there's enough to where I felt like we needed to just take a minute to cover how it's a little bit different from previous years. And then we'll get into the actual fiscal overview for 2011, get into the numbers, revenues, expenditures, capital projects, everything else. And then right toward the end, just spend a little bit of time looking ahead beyond 2011. And I'll start out with the budget format changes. You'll notice probably the biggest change, other than the cover's a little different and it's about 70 pages shorter. The biggest change we have is based on feedback we received actually over the past year and before that, but it's really been something that's been mentioned a lot more lately, and that is the segregation of the different police jury departments from other agencies that are in the budget document, such as the DA, the library, coroner's fund, and others, as well as the special service districts that are in the budget. Those have been included prior to this year in the overall total of the budget, but they really aren't under the police jury operationally. Police jury has no operational authority. They're simply there because you handle their accounting. So they're important, and it is important for them to be in the book, but the total police jury budget will reflect just police jury operations, and that's the biggest change this year. I think all of these changes are made to make the document more useful and easier to understand. We've added in the budget summary section comparative totals with previous years, which hadn't been there before. Revenue expense information accompanies each narrative. Each department, each fund has a narrative, and now instead of just having the expenditures and revenues in the back sections, we'll have a quick revenue expense summary with each narrative, so it's all right there. We added a major grant category this year. It probably won't be one we have every year, but the primarily hurricane recovery related grants have been large enough to where they warrant their own fund, and so we wanted to pull that out separately and show it. And then for ease of reading, we've condensed the departmental narratives into bullet format. Most fit on one page, and they hit the highlights of their accomplishments this year and their goals for next year. And there's a few other changes, but as you go through the document later, these are the main ones. And before I forget, I think probably as we speak, or certainly by the end of the meeting tonight, the budget document as proposed will be on the parish's website for anybody who wants to start looking at that during the public comment period. Let's go into the fiscal overview, and I want to start by saying something that maybe doesn't need to be said, but I think it does. The budget is balanced. That's not something at every level of government we can say these days. This is, I think, the 23rd year or more that we have presented to you a balanced budget, and that's very important in these days of harder economic times. Our focus, if you're looking at a theme for this budget, it's really on cost containment, and it's reflective of the environment we're in, and that's what everybody needs to be in right now. At the same time, we never take our eye off the ball on delivering value for those services. I'm very proud of our staff that this year has responded greatly. As you all know, earlier in the year, we implemented some cost-cutting measures out of necessity, but they never dropped a level on the service delivery, and we're very proud of that. It's always going to affect services to a degree when your costs are down, but we've been able to manage pretty well. At the same time, we're watching our dollars in the operational category. There's a significant amount of capital investment, which is really geared to the future, and I'm going to hit on some of those projects individually later in the presentation. I think you'll be very pleased to see we're able to invest in the future while at the same time keeping our budget in balance. And I'll divide the discussion into a comparison of this year's budget with the proposed budget. We'll go through some revenue slides, some expenditure slides, and break that down into operations and capital. This is the overall comparison of the budget. And again, remember, if you're looking at a 2010 budget and say, what is this number? This $180.2 million is the current budget if you take the police jury operation in our current budget. Again, it separates out special districts that are in the budget, affiliated agencies. They're in the document, but not in this total. So it's apples to apples. Our proposed budget for 2011 is $161.7 million, which is a decrease of 10.2%. Reflective of different things. If you look at the categories, the blue is operational cost in those two bars. The red is the capital expenditures, which you can see in 2011 are down a good bit from this year's budget, but again, still a lot of investment there. And then the grants category, which we've added, is in the summary, is the green. Let's look at that in the numbers. And I won't go through each of these in detail, but you can see broken down by operations, 4.7% decrease from this year. And that is, again, a testament to all of our departments really working hard to get the most out of the dollars provided. The capital budget is down 22%, or $17 million. But still, $60 million is a substantial amount. The grants section is about the same as this year, and it's about 2.4% up, but of course that's money. We just spend whatever is available to spend on the purpose for which the grant was provided. And then the other category, that's primarily internal service funds or our insurance type funds. The percentage is big, but in dollar terms, it's really a very small part of the budget, and that's related mainly to the health care, cost of health premiums, which of course for everybody goes up. When it's all said and done, that again is a 10.2% decrease from this year's budget, or about $18.5 million. We broke it down. This graph simply shows what was in the column in 2011 on the prior slide. You can see our operational budgets this year and capital budgets are about the same in terms of overall size of the total $161.7 million budget. And then here's your grant funds and other. This is a little bit harder to read, but let's start with the revenues and what makes that up. you have several revenue sources. You'll notice the largest this year is actually prior year fund balance. In years such as this, in 2010, again in 2011, this is when you need your fund balances. When the revenues are down, such as sales taxes, tapping into fund balance is a necessity, but that's what they're there for. If you had to do this every year, it would start to be problematic, but it's really a very common and needed thing this year, so it makes up a larger part of revenues than most years. Our sales taxes, of course, and our property taxes, or what are called ad valorem taxes, are always two main sources of revenue. The big blue wedge is intergovernmental revenues, and that's primarily those federal grants we're talking about for hurricane recovery, and we'll get into some of that in a few minutes. Gaming, as you can see, which is talked about a lot, but in the big picture only represents about 6.5% of the overall revenue for the parish. So for those who might think gaming can kind of solve all of our fiscal challenges, it's a great resource, but in the big picture, it's literally not that big a piece of the pie. Let's go in a little bit deeper now into the sales tax portion of those revenues. What makes those up? The top two wedges, the blue and the purple, are the 1 cent tax. We have two taxes. We have the 1 cent tax, which goes to public works, operations, and capital, the top two. And then the bottom two represent the recently renewed 1.5 cent tax that was renewed in October. On the big wedge here is the road tax, if you will, for wards 2 through 8, and then the green is the solid waste fund tax, which we haven't had actually since 2002. It's reinstated for funding beginning in 2011. So this makes up all of our sales taxes in 2011, which are $30.8 million of the overall revenue stream. Let's take a look at how those sales tax trends have been going over the years. You can see mainly going upward, peaked in 2008. Sales taxes are a revenue source that follows the economy, so they're going to be more volatile. They go up and down a lot quicker depending on the state of the economy. And of course, we all know what's been happening in the last few years. And you can kind of see, if I can get the mouse working here. In 2010, we actually projected this year a 10% decline from 2009 in sales taxes, and to Tammy's credit, kind of crystal ball, she's pretty much right on. That's what we'll end up with. The good news, that's what we budgeted for, and we are staying within that budget. Bad news is the sales taxes keep going down. We'd like to sit here and tell you there's a sure light at the end of the tunnel and next year is going to be greater. We hope it will, but we got to really plan for what we think could be the case. And if it gets better, that'll be great news, but we need to plan for what is kind of currently forecasted. So this year, our forecast is actually to go down another 5% from the current year, 2011 compared to 2010. And that's reflected in the last bar. This is the 1 cent sales tax only, but the other tax shows a similar trend, but because the levy was a little different, we just took this one out to show the effect. Let's switch over to property taxes now, which is better news. Property taxes are a more stable source of revenue, and typically will show a slight rise. It's not real up and down as much, but the good news is it's steady. These are our various parish-wide property taxes that you levy, and this is just for information to show you what makes up the $29 million in property taxes that come into the police jury, and they're for a variety of services. Let's show the trend for the property tax valuations. This would apply to any governing body like the school board and others that rely on some property taxes for their revenues. As you can see, unlike the sales taxes, if you look at the last few years, even in 2009 and this year, you see some slight increases. And that's, again, when you have a diversity in revenue sources, which we have here, it's a good offset to those sales tax declines. The key to focus on is the blue bars. That represents the taxpayer valuations, which is what tax calculations and rates are based on. The red part of each column represents the homestead amount. So we're talking about 3 3.5% increase between 2009 and 2010 in property taxes, which is a modest increase, but it is an increase, and that's a good sign. Anytime your tax base goes up, that keeps the rates lower for taxpayers. The other revenue stream I wanted to focus on, there are others, but these are the biggies, is gaming revenue. And as a reminder, the parish has a gaming revenue district, and it allocates funds which are projected to be $23.7 million in 2011, but that's for all the entities in the parish that get gaming funds. You can see the police jury and the city of Lake Charles would each get $8.75 million out of that total. Educational institutions get some of the funding before it comes to us or the city. Port of Lake Charles actually gets some through its agreement with the L'Auberge. And then there's a small cities allocation of $1 million that represented by the Purple Wedge. So what have gaming revenues been doing? Not a huge change, but a downward trend. 2009 actual coming into the parish. And when I say parish, I mean all the entities, not just police jury. 24.5 million last year, projected this year 24 million, and then 23.7 million projected for next year, which is I think about a 1.3% decrease. Hopefully that goes up, of course, but that's going to be a lot like your sales tax trends, very responsive to how the economy is going overall. Let's switch now to expenditures. That's all the revenues slides and the various primary sources of revenue. So what do these revenues go towards? As has been the case for many years, public works is still our biggest area of operations, and it's right at 50% of our expenditures in 2011. This graph actually counts all operating and capital costs. We just put this one together to show the different service areas you have at the police jury, and you can kind of see for yourself how those dollars are broken down. Public health and safety is another primary area, and then general government, and you can see the rest of the categories. And this is, again, I know I've been repetitive, but because it's such an important change, this would represent just police jury related cost, not any affiliated agencies or special districts. This is the same slide I showed earlier. It's broken down just in another way. Instead of the service categories, this is how it's broken down in operations and capital and grants. So let's take a look at the operations first. The operations budget, which is going down 4.7% from 2010, again, is cost containment, emphasis, but retaining quality services. There is no workforce wage adjustment in 2011, and I will tell you that was a very difficult decision. We have an excellent workforce here at the parish, and we always have prided ourselves, and you have, on paying competitive wages, and we want to continue that. We find ourselves, like all other organizations and families, in a very unusual situation where across the country it is literally dozens in some cases of layoffs in local governments or more, furloughs, all sorts of really drastic things. And we have had some layoffs, but we've primarily been able to avoid that in most cases, but we have had to cut back costs, and just holding steady is very significant just to say that in these days. And so we felt it was very prudent to do this, but it's something, having said that, we still want to implement what we started actually over a year ago, and that is to implement a more modern classification and compensation plan. Some of our positions, especially at the some of the lower wage rate entry-level jobs and others, we need to be a little more competitive with, and we believe we can implement a portion of that in 2011. We're going to take a close look at that, make sure it's within budget constraints, but that will allow us to keep good workers and recruit and retain good workers. That's really what makes you successful as an organization, is the quality of the workforce. One of the things we've done to lessen the impact on compensation for the employees, though, is to absorb the premium increase related to health costs. They continue to go up, but without that absorbing those costs, not only would you have the no adjustment side, but the employees would have to assume a higher health care cost. But we're really trying to do our best to keep that from happening. So it's been absorbed in the departmental budgets by the police jury. That's the highlight on operations. It's essentially a status quo budget to try to reflect the economic times we're in, a slight decrease. But again, service delivery is key. Let's take a look at the capital project funds for a moment. We already saw by the revenues, most of what we focus on relates to public works. In this case, roads represent actually 71% of our capital budget, which out of the $161 million budget is, as you can see, $63.3 million, which is actually lower than this year's budget, but higher than this year's anticipated capital expenditures. And I'll get into the highlight areas of each of these capital spending projects. Transportation is just our bread and butter. We have over 1,200 miles of roads to maintain in Calcasieu Parish. We're one of the largest parishes in the state, and I would say the road system is second to none. And that's from the leadership of this body and the public willing to vote reasonable taxes upon themselves to keep a very important transportation network in good shape. That's another thing. It's not just roads. It's very high quality roads all throughout the parish. And all you have to do is sort of drive across the state in some areas and compare, and you can kind of see what we have here, and I think feel pretty good about it. We have a lot of projects we need to do to keep the courthouse complex buildings in good shape. A lot of basic things that are important, but you got to do, and some of these have been held off, and we need to move with them, including in this historic courthouse, a roof replacement, some waterproofing, a lot of interior lights, and a few others I didn't list, but it needs a lot of work right now. That building goes back to 1912. It houses many offices. So it is a very functional building, but it's old and it needs some work done. So that's in the budget for 2011. The 901 Lakeshore Building also has a lot scheduled for 2011, including renovations and mechanical upgrades. Although this isn't a 1912 building, it's still kind of old by modern standards, late 60s, early 70s, and it needs some upgrades. Roof replacement, cooling tower, and window filming are all very good preservation type work that should be done on that building, and the good news is we got a lot of grant funds for that. The renovations and mechanical upgrades, it does include the project to move the DA's office into 901. They will occupy the first 6th, 7th, and 8th floors. Once that's done, it's going to be a very challenging project because we have a lot of renovations that just are needed on the building, and as well as making the renovations for that office. And then you're going to have to move some people out, and one floor at a time, and it's going to be challenging, but we're going to start that, and we hope to actually get bids in for that, advertise probably in January, receive bids hopefully in February, and go from there. There's still some details to be worked out on some of the renovations, but the large part of that is already sort of done as far as design work, and so we want to move forward with that, and a lot of other good projects that will make that building last a long time and be energy efficient, more so than it is today. So it's putting money in now to save money for the future. Very excited about Burton Coliseum. This is a good aerial shot. I think Dick Grimion provided us with this shot. And it shows you all three of the main facilities at Burton. The ag barn all the way to the right, which is the southernmost part of the facility, was actually upgraded prior to Rita. The arena in the middle was just finished, and opened, I think, about almost a year ago now. Great facility. And then the Coliseum is all the way to the left. These two facilities, the arena and the ag barn, are totally renovated, great facilities, and now we need to focus on the main Coliseum building, which would be many projects that would go on throughout the next year and probably beyond. We need to replace the roof. We have to do several upgrades for Americans with Disability Act compliance, fire protection, lighting, restroom and concession and kitchen areas, and then some renovations to the chocolate room. The good news on this is you passed in 2000, earlier in 2010, or I get my times mixed up. I might need Claire Thompson's help on some of this, but a lot of the long-term Hurricane Ike recovery monies are going into this project. So most of this is funded through hurricane recovery monies as well as capital outlay from the state. I want to thank Mike Danahay and Blade Morris, worked very hard recently. Kelly Fontenot from our staff were able to secure an additional $1 million that needs to get approval in the legislature next year, but from some of that new core funding that had been freed up, and that was very good to go toward Burton. We believe strongly there's a lot of economic development potential for this facility. In the big picture, it's underutilized, but we need to fix it up before we really market it and make it more effective. The Seed Center, that's been in the news a lot lately. They had a meeting as recent as this morning, pre-construction meeting, and if all goes according to plan, the week after Thanksgiving, they're going to start work on that building out at the McNeese campus. The police jury is the agency overseeing construction, primarily responsible for the $7 million coming through you from CDBG. We're very excited about this. You'll hear a lot more along the way as we go forward. Drainage, of course, is, again, a fairly recent development that you awarded several $1 million actually in recovery funds to several high-impact drainage projects. If you add all of the drainage dollars in the budget, and it comes from different places like Road and Drainage Trust Fund, Hurricane Recovery, the Public Works budget has money in it. There's actually $6 million of drainage projects either local or through your internal operations or awarded through grants to drainage districts to be budgeted in 2011. And that is a large amount of funds, and that doesn't count the matching funds that come from these districts. So drainage is a very high priority in 2011, and you're going to see a whole lot of projects. In addition to that, there is still $1 million that we set in reserve that has not been spent yet that you had from the hurricane recovery money, so that our plan in 2011 is to start a program of allocating funds annually, hopefully at the $1 million level, and to keep that going for high-profile projects. And all of these are based on the model. Over these past 2+ years, all these studies have actually been very valuable in helping us determine what projects are needed. So the timing is really good with these funds. And the sewerage issue, of course, is the probably biggest challenge we have, that's as far as how do we go forward and how do you handle sewage in unincorporated areas. Prior to this year, or up through this year, you had actually approved $3 million in a reserve, mainly in the event we got capital outlay funding from the state and used as matching funds. In 2011, we've actually budgeted another $2 million to go along with that for a total of $5 million. In use of, we don't know what the outcome of the sewer issue is going to be. It's multifaceted, but we know whatever it is, it's going to take some funding. Probably a lot of it from gaming to help with some things like treatment capacity and things that won't be able to necessarily be offset by individual homeowners. We plan to come to the wastewater committee in December. I've talked to Mr. Andrew Pont, probably no later than December 20th or 21st, with a proposal that takes this to the next level, gives you something to chew on to decide, both on the plans for ordinance upgrades, for any new development, plan for how we decide, or how you decide how extensions might be done and how they be paid for, as well as the proposed inspection program, which we feel we can do with, we were actually pretty confident we're going to get an EPA grant to help with that, and we can do an inspection program with our in-house staff currently with no additional folks with that grant, and really knock a lot of that out without any additional cost. So there's a lot coming on the sewerage front, but for now the big news in the budget as far as that goes is that reserve, which again will total $5 million as of 2011 in the proposed budget. I know I went through a lot of information about the 2011 budget and the revenue side, expenditure side. This sort of wraps it up in terms of that, and of course we'll go over any questions you may have. But I think it's important to always look ahead. When you look just at 1 year, that's just your proposed spending of revenues for 1 year, but it's always part of a bigger picture. In this budget, there are some funds, but the issue is less money. It's more about vision and going forward. And at this point in time, we feel very strong that comprehensive planning and strategic planning are two processes we need to conduct. Of course, the comprehensive plan, we want to step back a bit. The whole effort is a lot to swallow at once, and we've learned a lot from community input. I feel there's a lot of good things in the whole Vision Calcasieu process, but we want to take them pieces at a time and more digestible bites, I guess, if you want to say it that way. And on the burner right now is focus is Unified Development Code, which we really need in this parish. And you've already approved the idea of having an advisory task force work with us. That's going to be coming up before you very soon. So there will be a lot of community stakeholders involved, and that's the focus for 2011. And if we can do this, it would go a long way and just take the next step after this process. The other one, strategic planning, really it's taking us to the next level. We're a very professional organization. The departments and the leadership on the police jury has set its mission. There are a lot of good goals in the document, but especially with the times we're in when the dollars are squeezed and you have limited revenues and a lot of demands, how do you decide what your highest priorities are? And I believe a more formal process is needed in a strategic planning document, as well as a greater use of performance measures to maximize the value to our citizens. If you really want to boil it down, the strategic planning is the what. What do you want to do as a police jury? What are your highest priorities? The performance measures are how well are you doing them. So it's a matter of what's your responsiveness, and then how well do you do something is really what that boils down to. You'll hear a lot more about this in the coming months. This is a process that wouldn't be just a project. It would be done regularly, but it really helps focus on what you want to do. There's 15 of you, and you all come with different needs and voices from your constituents about the biggest needs. And, you also look at what's going on at the state as we speak, whether you're talking about Department of Health, transportation, education, all sorts of areas are cutting back. And they're already probably looking to you and to other local leaders and saying, can we provide this service another way? And you're going to have to decide if you pick up any of that, if you don't, which ones. It gets more challenging when some of the other players are pulling out of service delivery, and it's only going to get tougher with a lot of these state cutbacks. So it's important to always look ahead while you're also manning the current situation. So I wanted to kind of throw that in at the end. Last slide, I wanted to kind of leave you with a thought on leadership. Real leaders are ordinary people with extraordinary determinations. I really like this expression in the slide because local government across the country deals a lot with the local needs, and you hear on a larger degree the needs of the public. Every level of government provides important services, but you're out every day in the grocery stores, you're at the ballparks, you're at the churches, you hear what goes on, and the leadership aspect is so important because you're very accessible when compared to some of the other levels of government. I think it's a great field to work in. You as elected leaders have a big job to do, but we're all just ordinary people trying to do some extraordinary things, and we can do that when we work together. And I think this budget represents that. It's very attentive to fiscal responsibility, but at the same time, there's a lot of good things that will pay off dividends in the future to make sure our economy and our community continue to grow. So with that, I will open the floor with any questions, or if I can clarify any of the presentation, I'll be glad to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. That was an excellent job, and I just want to say one thing quickly is the no salary increases is something that a lot of business throughout Southwest Louisiana has done. I know that was a tough call on your part, but to do that in the 2011 budget is something I think will really show the people that we're trying to work with this budget and do what we have to do at that point in time. And thank you for putting that in there. With that being said, Mr. Anderpont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me preface by saying kudos to the financial department and staff, everybody concerned, because I would be probably more surprised if this would not have been on the level that we've seen in the past year since I've been here. Brian, the only thing that I'm concerned about, and there's not a whole lot we can do about it, but the sales tax is, as we know it, is definitely down from previous years. Do you know about what percent we're off from what we were, say, 2 years ago?
We're 10% down this year from 2009. If you go back to 2008, I'm guessing, and Tammy might have a better guess, we're probably more like 20 to 25%. 2008 was the peak, and that's the last year locally that we had before the economy really started to get affected by the sales tax is affected by the economy.
Is every department impacted by the decrease in sales tax? Or?
No, the primary, matter of fact, almost exclusively, sales taxes go to Public Works, Operations, and Capital, and now that because of the October election, about $6 million of sales taxes will go to solid waste collection. But other than that, the rest of the departments are funded either through property taxes or grant funds primarily.
The only other thing I want to leave with you that was kind of a positive note was I heard on the news today that the gaming funds for October of 2010 exceeded 2009. So maybe we can keep a good relationship with the gaming people. I know that's statewide. It's just not in our area, but hopefully that we can maintain that level that we've got budgeted for 2011. Again, my hat goes off to you and the staff for such an excellent job. I yield the floor, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Anderpont. Any other discussion? Ms. Trimmy?
Thank you. Proud to be here today. Brian, just for clarification, it's my understanding, like you said, that most of the ones that sales tax besides the besides the garbage situation that we were fortunate enough to pass, goes to our road and all of our upkeep and maintenance of our parish roads mostly. And I guess this is kudos to our public works people and to all of our leaders that have been there at our public works department, and engineers like Tim and like Claude and like Alan and all of those. Isn't it a fact that they only spend what they got the year before? They do not spend. In other words, if X amount of dollars came in 2008, that's what they will spend in 2009. They will not project or spend anything in 09 that comes in 09, so that they know exactly it's a finite number of what can be spent in 011, because it's only what has already been collected. Is that right?
That's correct, Sandy, and it's been sometimes that's a tough policy to stick to when you have down revenues, but this is why you do that, and so it's easier to project what you need, and we're having to hit the fund balance more this year, but it's there to hit, and Hopefully things pick up by the time we can put some of that back and we don't have to go to it. I want to say, with all the departments, but Public Works, because of its size, has had, I think I don't know the exact number, but parish-wide, the budget, when you look at the personnel allocations, is down actually 26 full-time positions from this year, which is substantial, and then some, I think, 8 part-time. I can tell you, I don't sense that there's been any drop-off, if anything, an increase in service in Public Works, even though their revenues are way down. But again, we've been able to hold back on that because of fund balances, but they've been impacted, and it's taken a lot of good heads thinking about how to save dollars, and we're always trying to do that, but it means a lot to them, I know, for you to point that out.
Thank you. And the other question I was going to have asked was the 26 that were down and the 8 that are part-time. We had an emotional night one night with people that retired from Public Works that had been there for, some of them, over 30 years. I think we had like 100 years of service or something like that. And have we been able to do this just without filling those positions and sort of, in other words, we hadn't let 29 people go, but because of people retiring and attrition is why we have less employees now than we did before. Is that correct?
It's a combination, Sandy. There were some layoffs out of necessity from some of the grant funds like workforce development and housing, but the rest are by attrition. We've avoided layoffs in those areas, and that will be our goal because there is some turnover, and so we always ask, do we need to fill that position, but mostly from attrition.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Welcome. Any other comments from any of the committee members?
I would move to receive report, Mr. Chairman.
I got a motion by Mr. Anderpont. Second by Dr. Mackey. Are there any jurors in the audience that would like to speak on this behalf? Any objection? Hearing none, we receive report. Item 4, consideration of making recommendation with reference to approving request reallocation of previous awarded grant funding. Water District number 14 of Ward 5 of the amount of $59,875 for costs associated with water line extensions. I need a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Trimmies, second by Mr. Guidry. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, item 4 carries. Item 5, consideration of making a recommendation with reference to approving a grant amount of $26,000 for
Move
budget
on 5.
overruns. Water District 14 of Ward 5 for the Starks
Second.
LCDBG project. I got a motion by Mr. Anderpont and a second by Ms. Trimmy on item 5. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, item 5 carries. Item 6, consideration of making a recommendation with reference of approving Quest grant funding amount of $20,000 for floor renovations, the Recreation Center for Community Center and Playground District 1 of Ward 6.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Trimmy. I need a second.
Second.
Mr. Anderpont. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, item 6 carries. Item 7, consideration of making a recommendation
Move
with
on
reference to approving a grant amount of $5,000 to Care Help of Sulphur Christmas Food Baskets Programs. I got a motion by Mr. Anderpont and a second by Dr. Mackey. Is there any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, item 7 carries. Is there any other matters this committee needs to handle? Ms. Trimmy?
No, there's no other matters, but I just want to thank the Budget Committee people here tonight that have done a great job that I hadn't really been able to be here all this time. But I want to thank Francis because with the Water District in Starks, I sort of kind of let him down here for a while. And just to let you know, Francis picked up the bucket of water and carried it for me for the Ward 5 Water District, which is a big job, a huge job. And I just want to thank you personally and thank each one of my police drawers that have all stepped up and done a terrific job in making me look good. So thank you.
I didn't do anything that you would not have done for me.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Ms. Trimmy, Mr. Anderpont, the only reason he did it is because you didn't ask any of the other ones. We all
I
love
didn't
you,
ask
Sandy.
him.
We all love you, and we're glad to have you back. With that said, I'll look for a motion.
I
to
knew I
adjourn.
wasn't gonna get any.
Motion by Mr. Hassan, second by Mr. Guidry. We stand adjourned.